Let's talk about mutable and immutable objects. Immutable object is one whose state cannot be changed after creation. Any modification results in a new instance of the object. Let's look at some examples. I want to show you a few common use cases, as well as we create our own mutable and immutable version. At the end, you should be able to identify the differences in any situation. Let's begin. First, I want to initialize DateTime object which is going to be our mutable example. You might be familiar with this object because it's a very common way to work with dates. I'm going to output current hours value. Then I assign a new variable called new DateTime, and I'm adding 1 hour to it. I want to output value for the original object, and I can see that the values have changed. This is normal behavior for mutable objects. However, it can cause some problems and confusion, especially when there are hundreds of lines of code split across multiple classes, and we should say that approach is prone to errors. That's where immutable objects come into play because the definition says, immutable object is one whose state cannot be changed after creation. Any modification results in a new instance of the object. So if we modify the code and we run it again, we see that the reference object did not change original one. It's also worth noting that after modification, we create a new instance of the object and reassign to the variable. That was a quick example on objects that you might be familiar with, or you may have seen them how they work in general. Now let's create our own simple mutable object and then we convert it to immutable version. Hopefully after that you can decide what type of object you want to create and its purpose. I am creating a mutable object called counter with an initial value taken from a constructor. Then I'm adding a method called add1, which simply takes counter value and adds 1 to it. I go back to index.php, quickly include the class, initialize our mutable counter, and pass 0 as initial value. Then I create a new variable which points to the initial counter object. My new variable executes add1 method. I output our initial counter value, and rather than 0, I get 1. Again, this is the nature of mutable objects. To convert our counter into immutable object, I stick to the definition and I update our method when now it returns new instance of the object. As definition says, any modification results in a new instance of the object. I quickly confirm that my initial counter value is not modified anymore, and I reassign my new counter variable to the result of executed add1 method. And finally, I output both variables onto the screen. There are multiple advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is a small performance gain using immutable objects as opposed to immutable. However, it depends how much code there is, how it's organized, and what design to follow. It might be more important to write code that is less prone to unintentional errors and mistakes. So I hope you learned something new today. I'll see you in the next one.